to be allowed to public? You can't.
That's it. Should be open or locked from open.
How are you? Hey,
I'm good, thank you. Yes. Yeah, and some goodies for you. Yeah. Oh, they did. You can't hear today?
What's that?
You can't hear today?
What was all this background clutter
Okay.
I was having trouble with?
I'll try to talk loud.
And you do have kind of a soft voice.
I do.
I was gonna sit by you, but I didn't want people on
they're like,
each web to start talking.
like Christine, somebody has to control you today.
Unless you want to. Unless you want to. I don't want that.
Nobody does.
Nobody does.
Nobody does. I remember when I was at work, I was like, oh, this is my boss, he's in charge of me. He was like, no. No, all I do is try to make sure he doesn't get arrested. That's all I do.
Only in Sierra Vista. No one in Phoenix said boo. So only if I'm in Sierra Vista. Or for what you
So I know when nobody's happening.
And it's,
Oh, I bet on before it's worse.
William is so irritated. That's your name. Oh,
Platinum blonde. And then you'll go sing gray hair.
I won't be allowed to.
I was like, how do we natural? So you were practicing for people who got hired. I don't know if I make that assumption. I don't know if I do that strong.
I will boldly admit, I'm afraid I can do that.
Because if it's smaller, I have a clutch. My clutch is like
No, if you don't mind, thank you.
But I call it clutch. No, I never use it which is basically.
You can if you want to. Hey, slide. Why don't you slide this way and put Rachel on the end?
I just moved.
Or you sit on that end and put Rachel in between us. Although I prefer the first one. Okay. Don't tell Rachel I said that.
Did Rachel do so good that she get voted off?
Off the island. Hey, Sarah.
Hey, Sarah.
So I have an important case. Shopping.
Devil.
How are you? This is a new situation for me. You sit on my right side instead of my left.
Oh, that is
I don't know if I can handle it.
It's such a change.
Yeah, radical.
So I'll just keep bumping.
That's right. Radical.
I'm too old for a lot of things.
Not as bad as Finland or the Samoa. But yeah.
Girl Scout cookie.
I do not have any Girl Scouts in our home.
The Girl Scout. No, take them.
What's that?
Eat the Girl Scout cookies. I demand.
Well, unless Chuck's going to do it.
No.
Yes.
No, I've already eaten like 20 boxes, I'm sure.
Whatever.
So cute.
Oh, that's
it.
No, Mr. Felix.
Oh.
Oh, because I'm
He'll be
what's
here.
here for you people.
He's still got 2 minutes.
It looks very fun.
It's because I watched it and I didn't have time to like do every detail.
Yeah.
So So it's fluffy.
Yeah.
Fluffy's fine, Grace.
They made
So he will be
the,
here when
I guess it was Adam, I don't know, made it a Facebook event, the meeting on Thursday.
Yeah.
Oh, how nice.
So now everyone
No.
will remember.
No.
Not a lot of room for it.
No.
Where?
No.
Yeah, but then the
People
question
can
is,
just stand up
where
and
the
do
hell
their
would we put it? Well, we put, get one of those little table things and pass it around. That's on TV.
up there for like when David talks.
Well, the briefer should stand over here and do his thing. That way he can catch the crowd. So we don't really need a podium over there. I don't.
Throw it right there.
Agreed.
I know there's people that
Do we
are.
need to put this to a vote?
I know there are people that feel they need a podium to lean on and hide behind, but that's not.
They're gonna have to be grown.
That's where they're gonna have to be a real adult person.
I didn't wear my good shoes today.
I'm
Get a
grown.
podium.
I'm not grown.
Like the news
I actually
anchor.
prefer
You
not
Put
gotta
me
stand
behind
up.
the thing.
I only got a jacket on. I just did this. We are screwing.
And nobody knows. It's not
See
my
that? Look at that. I think I forgot to leave it. Yeah. Let me see what
Listen.
Did I leave it? Did I put a loop? Did I not take out a loop on one of the E's?
Okay, 3 o'clock. Good afternoon, everybody. I call to order the regular work session for the City of Sierra Vista for February 12, 2018. And I have a couple of, before we get started, I have a couple of administrative announcements. And first, I want to thank everybody for their best hopes and wishes that they've given me during my recent illness. The latest is I will see the surgeon next Monday, and they're going to implant a little port. And then after that port is implanted, I will have a treatment with the chemo for every 2 weeks, probably through the end of July. And based on the course of treatment, it could be shorter, it could be longer. And he tells me that I can continue to do the work sessions, the council meetings, and even the trip to DC that's planned, depending on how I feel. So everything's looking good. There was only one note of the 15 that had cancer. That's a good thing. And we'll find out shortly by some chemical things to do with sugar. Evidently, sugar is attracted to cancer. So they'll do, one of the first things they'll do is they'll give me 24 hours where I have no sugar, and then take me in and give me as much glycol, glucose, or whatever it is that they can, and hopefully that'll go to wherever there may be cancer, or if lucky, where there won't be any cancer, and we'll get rid of whatever may be floating around before it attaches itself and does any more damage. So prognosis is great. I thank you guys for your hopes and prayers and your concerns. Item number 2 is we're now in a new location, as you know. Whether you're one of the council people speaking, you need to enunciate clearly so that it can be picked up. And poor Miss Maria back there can write the minutes correctly. If you're presenting, please stand up, enunciate. Tony, use your command voice. Okay, you tend to, as you're talking, you tend to go real quiet and talk and relax. Okay, and there are others out there like that, but I picked up on Tony because as a retired colonel, I know he's got a command voice. No doubt about it. So please, well, that's right. That's right. As a colonel, you have people.
In those days,
Yeah, as a colonel, you have people for that. But when you were a young lieutenant or a captain, I know you didn't. So I know you got the talent.
Where's Mike?
Okay, and Mike, can give him a kick if you need to. Okay. Okay.
Don't tell him that.
Okay, so we're ready to start here. The first item on the agenda is item A, February 14th council meeting. And what I see is the normal roll call, invocation, pledge, awards presentations. Do we have awards presentations this time?
Just the sister city or the youth.
Youth?
The
No, that's the okay. The presentation for the there's no award, but there is a presentation on behalf of the sister cities. City manager's report. He's going to talk about upcoming meetings and open and bids. Under old business, item 2. Is the West End expansion, redevelopment expansion area. Are there any questions, or do we need a staff presentation? I know this is a recurrence from the last meeting. I was not here, unfortunately, on my birthday, 65th birthday, because there was a guest at the hospital. But we had 2 abstentions, and we need to have 5 votes for that to carry. Is there any issues or things that we need to discuss now in preparation for the meeting on Thursday? Any changes in the abstentions? Okay, so hopefully we'll get it passed then, and Tony and Matt can run with this. Okay, so no discussion on item number 2. Item 3 is the consent agenda. We have appointments, the Arts and Humanities Commission, and the Planning and Zoning Commission. Any comments or discussion? And while we're talking commissions, I'm gonna start approaching each one of you, and I just want to have a quiet discussion about how we make the boards and commissions more effective.
Okay.
And hopefully from those discussions, I will be able to go back to staff and say, here's how we need to proceed to make the boards and commissions more effective for the future. Okay? And I know, Christine, you got some good ideas, so you and I need to get our heads together when you're available to start that, and I'll contact each one of you and just kind of share ideas, and then I'll come up with sit down with staff, come up with an action plan, and then bring it back for further discussion among the whole council. Okay? Let's see. What are we going to do next? We got that's that. New business. Approval of the meeting minutes, January 24th. Any additions, deletions, corrections, comments on the 24th January meeting? Since I wasn't there, it's not really good for me to comment. Yes, ma'am.
Correction on page 2. There's just a typo on the date of the date that the person is until is much later than it should be.
Okay, that's a special meeting or the regular meeting? Is there 2 meetings?
Regular meeting.
Okay.
Page 2, item 2.6.
So that's item 5.
Or
2020,
yeah.
2022.
There's
Okay.
an extra 2 there, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
just a typo. is all.
Anything else about either one of the minutes for the item 4 or 5? Yes, ma'am. Oh, you're just
No,
catching your
just
breath. Okay. Item 6 is the interagency agreement with the town of Huachuca City, declaring support for animal services. And who's going to do that one, Chuck?
I'll do with me.
Okay. So tell us what's going on.
Well, Huachuca City's had a bit of difficulty lately, as evidenced by this item and the next one. Back in December, their animal shelter had a fire that was then subsequently followed by a flood in the same week. And so their shelter is uninhabitable, and so they asked Sierra Vista for our help and asked if we were able to begin accepting their dogs and cats. And so this agreement would provide the structure and the fees and the costs for how we can make that relationship happen. I asked them for their numbers from last year, and so for the entire calendar year of 2018, they took in 50 dogs and 13 cats total. So we do not expect this to have a significant impact on shelter operations, and we'll be able to help them out while they decide what to do with their shelter. That's it, Mayor.
Okay. The concern I shared with the management staff when we met on Monday in my weekly meeting was that we are growing again. We're looking at hopefully a short-term helping Huachuca City, but the question was, should we at least have a contingency plan for additional capacity at the Brewis Center, and hopefully they'll look at that. And again, it won't have an immediate effect on what we're doing right now, but again, that's a future item and something we probably should discuss if it's appropriate during our 2-year planning process, which is coming up. So, Chuck?
And Mr. Mayor, originally our concern were the animals taken in by the county and the preponderance of the animals at the Huachuca City shelter were from the county. So we have had discussions with the county regarding expansion of the Brewis Center. We're not sure if those are going to go anywhere or not. But if in the event that the county did want to do that, an expansion of the Brewis Center would be needed in order to accommodate that. So we don't know exactly where the county is going to be on that. That would be a budget item for next year's budget.
And do we have numbers on what it would cost to expand?
Not yet. We're basically concept level right now.
So currently, we're thinking around 50 dogs a year for the next year and a few cats.
That was their numbers from last year. They're pretty consistent over the past few years.
And this would be at no cost to Wachita City?
No, 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 no.
Okay. I
Read the
didn't hear you
read the
talk about-
agreement.
No,
Yeah,
Schedule A lays out all of the fees and all of the situations and
Okay.
fees for just about everything that we could.
Okay.
We could
We could
reasonably
cover.
charge, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, something that wasn't clear, and it probably is in there, but they have their own. They still have their own animal patrol officers,
Yeah.
control officers, and just are only just bringing them to us.
Yes.
Okay.
And so when they have to do the reports and stuff, and I was looking through, are they, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna kind of address you, I apologize. Do they have to put it in the format that we use to make it easier for us? I saw the questions so are they using kind of our format to make our life easier since we're making their life better?
Yes,
Okay.
and they're taking care of their spay and neuter and all that stuff under their own budget and stuff, or just housing.
Okay.
Okay, so we're like a boarding.
Port in the storm.
So people from Wachita City or wherever would come to our shelter to
adopt.
To adopt.
Yes.
Okay.
This is just Wachita City animals, these are not county animals. So the county animals are gonna be taken either to Douglas or one of the other facilities, so.
Which they're also having issues with.
Right, so this is just Wachita City residents only.
And so when they come in and adopt an animal from us that is a Wachita City animal, does that revenue go, I guess, against their standing bill, or how is that gonna work?
So under the Schedule A, if you look at it, there's a fee they pay that when we accept an animal,
Right.
$25 and that kind of stuff, and then once it gets spayed and neutered, then we take on, because most of our costs under the adoptions are the spayed and
Spayed
neutered.
neutered, yeah.
So there's a reduced cost for that.
So we keep the adoption costs is what the
That's
answer
what
is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they'll pay us to turn the animal over to us,
And then we
it's-
just do
it's
a,
ours, and the adoption.
got it.
is ours.
Okay. Everybody clear? Everybody understand?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So we ready to go on to the next item to help our good friends from Wachusett City? Who's gonna do that?
That's me, Mayor.
Okay.
So, Wachusett City is also experiencing a situation where they need some outside human resources support. It needs to be impartial, it cannot be handled internally. And so they approached us and asked if we could lend our human resources staff at a reimbursable rate to help them investigate the situation. So the agreement lays out the terms of what our staff will provide for them. It includes liability coverage, and it sets an hourly rate for our staff support.
Okay. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
So my question, and we're going to look under the MOU under 1E, is where the amount is to not exceed $56.26 per hour. My question is that I believe if that's what we're charging for Ms. Fleming, that we will actually be losing a little bit of money for that. And for Ms. Dumont, we would be making a little bit of money. So it's not kind of a true reflection, it's more of a blend of what's going on. For me, I would feel more comfortable if we did that as a 2-track. So if Ms. Fleming worked on it, we would charge this amount to make back our cost plus the burden. And if Ms. Dumont did it, that we would make back
Well,
this
I'm
money.
going to back up here, and I just philosophically I want to talk about cost and burden. Obviously, we pay our personnel director X amount per hour for her services, and if her services are going to Wachusett City is a special thing, I think that's okay. The question we need to really ask ourselves, obviously, if we're charging for her to go work for them for 10 hours, that means she's not giving us 10 hours. So how do we as a council, when this is a situation where we're trying to help out a neighbor, essentially, so how do we, that's philosophically, that's the question in my mind, is how do we justify that? Obviously, there's still going to be a cost when she's not working in the office to us. How do we determine that? And it's a balancing act. So Chuck, you have any ideas?
Well, based on the agreement, and Ms. Wolf, we can certainly look at charging out hourly per the employee based on what their real rates are, and we can make that change before the meeting. So that's.
And we don't want to do it, make the charge the cost and plus an excessive thing
I agree
To
with
sort
you.
of show that we're good, to show that we're good neighbors. But I think I agree with you that it's costing us a little bit too, other than just the hourly rate. And where does that fall?
And I think I don't think this will be a long investigation. I think Ms. Dumont will be the one that will be
Doing most of the work.
Ms. Fleming will obviously have to review.
Do some oversight,
and,
yeah.
and turn it in, but what we're charging will be revenue into us, so, we'll be getting revenue on top of what we're already paying out. So I don't anticipate too much interruption in our operation as a result of this.
And I don't think that there's going to be necessarily interruption, and I'm not really necessarily looking, and I think there is a point where you talk about how do we be good neighbors, and some of that is that we don't completely recoup back exactly everything that's going on. But I just think, and it actually, if we did it on the 2 tracks, it actually might be better for Wachuca City, because if Ms. Dumont does more, then it may be less. But what if Ms. Dumont, what if she gets the flu?
Yeah.
What if something
And that's a very good point. It probably should be a 2-track. You have Dumont or whatever her rate is plus a little bit, and then Ms. Fleming at her rate and plus a little bit, and we're going to bill them by hours, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we can work it out. I think that's going to be worked out easily. Yeah, that's good suggestion, Christine.
So we'll go ahead and make those changes.
Does anybody have any concerns?
I don't have any
or is
concerns.
opposed?
I just want to make sure I understand. So we're going to just charge Ms. Fleming's hourly rate, but we're not going to worry about burden.
No, it would include
You'd include
burden.
a little bit.
It should include burden.
Okay.
In my
A little bit, yeah. Not probably the whole burden, but a reasonable amount.
I would hope not.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't think it should count that she's not putting her hour towards us. I think that's where we become the good neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you got the guidance check, you know what to do, okay, so we'll see a little change of that, so make sure you read your packets before Thursday evening, okay?
Obviously, the main thing I was concerned about is we don't want any liability that may.
And then that's an issue too, and I think that's worked out in the contract.
And that's in the whole thing, correct?
Okay, any other questions? All right then, that concludes the meeting. Anybody have any comments or questions overall on the meeting? Then we'll go on to the next item. Next item is an update on technical assistance program by Sun Corridor Incorporated. Chuck, are you or Tony going to introduce?
I've got it, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
So, Mr. Mayor, we've had a previous meeting from Sun Corridor. So really this is kind of the intermediate step, realizing that this grant will run through August of 19. So I do want to introduce, for those of you that have not met everyone, Steve Egan, who's kind of been our subject matter expert piece in this equation, David Welsh, the Vice President from Sun Corridor Inc., and we've brought Yvette Rambo, one of our business owners, to give her perspective on the technical assistance program. So we'll do a quick presentation, allow you to ask questions, and we'll go from there.
Okay, and I just remind everybody, make sure you enunciate and speak clearly so that we can make sure we record this for the public. Thank you.
I'll step over this way.
There we go.
All right, how's that? My name is Steve Egan. Tony introduced me. Thank you very much. I was here last October when we first talked about this program. Are all of you familiar with what the assistance program is?
We have 3 new council members, so you might want to hit that.
Very good. So I'll give you the elevator speech. What we are doing is we are working from a grant that was given to the city of Sierra Vista to assist small businesses in their growth and their expansion actually outside of what the Fort offers. If you think about the defense cycle, the defense industry, it goes in cycles. Those communities that are heavily dependent on something like the Fort, like we have here in Fort Huachuca, they can be significantly impacted if a downturn were to happen on the defense budget. So what we've been tasked to do is to work with companies that have been identified that we can help them expand and grow, contribute to the Sierra Vista community, and in fact become more and more independent of what would be tied to the Department of Defense. And that can be expanding in all different kinds of government. So it's across the board. Last time I was here, we didn't have any companies yet. We were just doing the recruiting. Since that time, we have 5 companies. We've been working with them, and I think we're on a great path. There's been some hires in those companies, which is a good thing for Sierra Vista, and they're seeing some growth. So I'm going to actually turn it over now to David Welsh, who's going to take you through some of the specifics.
Steve's the pretty face, and I get to do.
You have an eye infection.
And we want to get to Yvette.
So I will be brief, but we do have a couple of slides. So as Steve said, we have been working since October of last year, but really the interaction with the firms got going in earnest in January of 18. So we've been at this just over a year where we actually can get inside and talk to the firms. We've spent quite a bit of time with them, coming back and forth with between Sierra Vista and introducing them to what we call our subject matter experts, which were in HR and marketing and contract development. And we introduced all of those firms to all of that group of SMEs that we've been doing. So we've been doing that regularly during that past year. And that's really resulted in some interesting things happening from my perspective. We weren't sure where this was going to go. But sitting with these firms, each one of them has a unique set of challenges that we wanted to try and apply these resources to through the grant. And we've been able to do that, and some of the things that have jumped out have been, just getting those firms to take a pause out of their busy days and think about how to organize their staffs more efficiently, how to think about how to organize their days more efficiently, their weeks. A couple of firms have come back to us and said, we've taken your recommendation and I have Thursday afternoons to myself now, because I moved my staff around a little bit so that I'm not doing everything every day. And I take a pause back to figure out how I'm going to, because as the owner of the business, I got to figure out how to run it every day, and I got to figure out how to fill the pipeline, right? So just little things like that where they took a step back and started to implement some of these things, I think we've found to be fascinating. And we've been exploring, I'm going to get to in a minute how we did this, but exploring and recommending strategic partnership arrangements and how do you go get more work? I mean, the bottom line is, how do we turn this into additional contracting and additional work for these firms so they can grow it, add employees, and add revenue. So impacts to date, and we've been reporting on this to Tony and to you every month, and there's a cumulative report that you probably have seen or have thrown to the side as it's come in. But we have seen jobs added by these participant firms. We are going to start confirming these numbers now as we go into a reporting phase on this to final report. But we're looking at over 40 employees that have been added since we've started talking to them. Now, not all of those are in our Sierra Vista. These are firms that go out and get contracts outside of the area. So it's looking right now that it's tracking about 2/3 of those employees are outside Sierra Vista area, about 1/3 inside. That's still good for Sierra Vista because those firms are based here. So that revenue that those employees generate still flows back through the owners here of this firm and does good things, if you will. There are ripples in the pond as you drop the pebble, right? And we've seen, as I've mentioned, the strategic staffing changes there that I think that you'll see, and we want to get to Yvette. She's going to corroborate some of this for us and tell you a bit of her story, which I think is more important. And then contracting, connections and the contracting opportunities. Go ahead to the next one. So one of the things that we came upon was a partnership. Do you want me to just go?
Yes, the mouse.
There we go. So we were working with Tony with the firms, and we thought, well, wouldn't it be good to have a kind of a keynote event that would wrap some of this up together? And we came across a partnership with the Diversity Business Development Center that does this Outlook Summit, this Procurement Outlook Summit. And we thought, well, this is a perfect partnership. So we entered into a partnership with those folks to convene this event last week. Some of you attended, I know the Vice Mayor did, and I think some of you, some of the others of you did. And it was just a perfect fit. They were bringing contracting opportunities to the community. We were able to work with our firms to get them prepared for this event, do some homework prior to who the speakers are going to be, then get one-on-one meetings with them during the event, and now we're working with them to follow up afterwards to pursue those opportunities that maybe they didn't have before. So we're very happy with this relationship, and it was very efficient for the grant. For us to have pulled off such a meeting and spend your grant money on it would have cost us 10x. But to piggyback onto them and collaborate with them, we were able to all get what we needed out of this, and I think the firms did too. One of the pieces that came out of that was a featured speaker that we brought out of San Diego that was a successful 8A contractor. And he got to have an informal dinner with all of our firms and really get down into what it took for him to grow his firm, for them to ask him questions strategically on where they were in their growth. And he has offered to mentor them moving forward at a phone call away. He was very generous with his time. And I think they found him very valuable. I did, and I learned quite a bit from him. And we hope that they will continue to do so as they grow their opportunities. And then we've also secured this connection with this the Diversity Business Development Center. They're actually out of Phoenix, and they go around the country putting these summits on, but they've developed an incredible network of contracting officers, small business contracting officers, 8A contacts, and they're following up with our firms, with our assistance, to try to get even more out of this event and out of those 24 speakers that came to that thing. So we think we're really going to be able to milk this into some opportunities that moving forward. And even beyond the grant, we think the relationship with this group could be very valuable to these firms, and this introduction has been a big piece of that. My own slide. And then Alan was the group, the guy that we brought in from San Diego. And he was just fascinating, I think. The wealth of experience and the ups and downs that he had gone through to get to where he is was just fascinating. And he may look like he's way out ahead of some of these firms, but he could relate to them as to, you know, even 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago that he wasn't much bigger than them. And what he had gone through to build his firm up were things that were very, very relevant to the firms that we're working with. So we found that to be very, very satisfying, I think. So just moving forward with us, you know, we're about, as Tony said, we got about 5 months left. This will wrap up in August. We're going to continue to work with these firms to follow up with the meetings. We met with an additional firm today that we're going to add to the ranks and kind of jumpstart that and do a hyper version, because we weren't able to get to him at the beginning of the program. But we think we can launch into that. We had a very productive lunch with him today, and I think, well, you know him as Craig. Yeah. Once he transitioned off the council and there wasn't going to be a conflict there, we're now able to work with him, and he's a good candidate for this. And there's a couple of our experts that I think will be particularly relevant to him. So we're looking forward to working with him. And then we'll start working with Tony, and the other parts of the scope of this are to wrap up with a final report that kind of says, what did we learn? What can we pass on to you that says that maybe these are some recommendations as you move forward past the grant? Because that's the ultimate value. When you're spending somebody else's money, it's a little bit easier. What happens when the money runs out? What do we do then? You know, how do we continue this forward without that grant? And we want to be able to set you up to do that. So we'll be back to present some recommendations post-grant. In that time frame, we'll work with Tony on that. Now, as a part of this presentation, we thought it would be important for you to hear from somebody that actually was on the other end of this, and maybe we should leave the room. You could be really candid with them after we...
Yeah. She's a straight shooter, so be careful.
Oh, I've learned. Trust me, I've learned.
Don't call me Rambo for nothing.
I've learned all of them. We had a fantastic visit at Yvette's shop. Yvette Rambo is obviously the owner and operator of M&M Team, and I'm going to let her go into some of the details of this firm. I find this company fascinating. We drive by it, of course, every time when we come in from Tucson. But we did a great tour, and I learned a great deal about what she does, and mostly I just have enjoyed working with her. So I'm going to let Yvette be a face for the program, and then we can take questions, all right?
I'm going to grab this, though, because my hands will be sweaty. First of all, thank you. My name is Yvette Rambo. Myself and Tim Montoya were the owners and operators of what we branded as the M&M Team. We've got M&M Auto Collision and Powder Coatings in Chuka City, and then we've got M&M Auto Paint Supplies and Customs in Sierra Vista. A lot of you are already familiar with Monty's Motors on Fry Boulevard. It's what we call the mother company. Been here since 1956. That's why we kept the M&M brand, because back in '56, when they also had auto parts and paint, it was M&M Auto Paint and M&M Auto Parts. So just to give you a quick background on me, I basically started in corporate America. For 25 years, I worked in marketing and advertising. Started out in the northwest suburbs of Chicago, and then graduated to moving between a liaison of Chicago, LA, and New York. Worked on the agency side. And then I flipped to the network side, ABC Sports and ESPN. And then from there, got burned out. I was married to my career, and I wanted a life. So my parents were retiring in Arizona. We're all golfers, and I ended up in Arizona in 2004. While I was working in corporate America and living out in the Midwest and having fun in California, working up the corporate ladder, Tim Montoya, my partner, he was here in Sierra Vista. He's obviously worked for his father, owned and operated with Monty's Motors, worked with his brother, and he believed that the paint side of Monty's Motors could and should be its own entity. So he talked to his father. His father didn't think it could happen, but said, have at it. Sold him his inventory on the paint. Tim opened up M&M Auto Paint Supplies in 02, and it succeeded. So then you fast forward to Tim and I, my significant other of 10 years, been married for 2. We started thinking and brainstorming of a company that we would open up together, and that was M&M Powder Coatings. We brainstormed in 2012, put it all together in 2013, opened it up in 2014. Then in 2016, we actually expanded and opened up M&M Auto Collision. Expanded with a 4th and a 5th building, and then in 2017, we added some more heavy investment, paint booth, frame rack, and 2 more employees. Fast forward, we get introduced to this wonderful grant that you guys started advertising. Hence, my relationship with Mike and Tony started, and we were very blessed to be approved to be a part of this Sun Corridor grant. With Dave and Steve and the open forum and the panel that they brought to the table for us, especially at the beginning. You had retired CEOs, COOs, marketing specialists, financial folks. There's a medley of different peers of the community, but also people from the outside looking at Sierra Vista and what they could do, what they could bring to the table. And that was hugely beneficial to someone like myself. A lot of the things I'm going to go through, you're going to be like, well, but those are 101. That's stuff that you would do in your next steps as a business owner and what you're going to do to improve the company. Not so easy when you're working 6.5 days a week, full-time, because you're an owner, but you're an operator. So they bring a fresh, new idea or thought because they're not working in your business 24/7, but they have run or worked for successful businesses. So in a nutshell, what I came up with, and we've all heard that motto, the biggest thing that I brought from that first meeting was smarter, not harder. And it was refreshing, the encouragement that I got from that very first meeting. Almost brings me to kind of a little bit of a mushy point, because I sighed and said, you know, we are really doing everything right. We just need those next steps. We need those encouragement. We need the advisement. And we went ahead and I did bite the bullet. We hired 2 more employees. We improved our social media presence, because then I was able to start to focus on that by hiring the 2 employees. Then we obviously promoted Mike Russell to our GM, and then again, that would free me up from not operating on a daily basis, still being present, taking care of that customer service, but I've got a go-to guy that's trained by me. And then of course Tim was stepping over from M&M Auto Paint Supplies, and he was bringing a face to it as well. We divide and conquer in these companies. I run the advertising, PR, and then run the day-to-day with the collision shop in Wichita City. He does all of the accounting for all 4 companies under 2 umbrellas, and then he runs and operates the facility in Sierra Vista. So between the 2 of us doing these hires on both sides, we actually hired a person and a half, because we had a part-time person, also on the paint side. So just in that little decision, it was 3.5 people we hired. Then, of course, we started doing geo-targeting, geo-fencing. Up the advertising campaigns with Yelp and Google. I actually started purchasing ads, getting familiar. I'm 50. Facebook, I am just not that familiar. I come old school advertising. Nielsen, radio, TV, did that for 25 years. Internet, completely different animal. I had to go back to school, figure all that out. The gals from the Herald actually did a lot of assistance on that, believe it or not, when we did that geo-fencing. I did have to pull back a little bit with those advertising dollars, because I saw the need with Yelp, with Google, and helping with the social media and the phones. And then one other big, this was a goal that we hadn't achieved in the first 6 months yet, because we were ready for that next step as far as contracts, city business, fort business, etc. That takes you to the icing on the cake, which was this procurement summit. I can't even say enough about how much I benefited. Being associated with Sun Corridor, the city, Tony, Mike, the speakers that attended this function put us at the top of the totem pole. We weren't just a cold call, walk up, shake hands. They were actually seeking us. So when I walked up and said, oh, I've been trying to find you. So not only do I have a list of the folks that, these folks from the procurement side, U.S. Army, the city, Cochise County. Now I've got all the slides, the 1-2, the black and white, to go do my due diligence, but also I got a personal handshake. And when I call them and say, yes, I was one of those 5 businesses, a part of the program, a part of the grant, they're going to say, oh yeah, I do know you. And they are going to give me the time of day. And not to say that they wouldn't, but there could be 1 out of 5, I could be still a number. I'm not anymore. And then as far as new business that I achieved from just the summit, there were a couple businesses in particular that I shook hands with and exchanged cards. Most of the folks in there, you know, you got 70% of them, they're actually there to learn how to do contracts. They're working on that side of it. They're in a suit and tie. They're, you know, doing the corporate side of it. But that 25% were key for me, because the small business that was in that room to be taken is big business for somebody like my business. And that was Precision Fab. I'll just go through these real quick. There was a contractor from Tucson, Lloyd Shin. He actually is doing work in Sierra Vista. We had EPG. There were 2 contacts that were actually on the list to do a speaking announcement. They actually couldn't make it. I've got the contacts though. So, and I already have a contact at EPG, and I think I can even back into the other one. But again, you get a name and a number and where they're at, I'll do the rest. And that was another proof in the pudding. They may not have physically been there based on what was going on with the government and everything, but I've got the names to support it. And then I can't say enough about Alan Maxwell. I need to actually take that to the next level, and I'm going to have to be the one to do my due diligence, because to their point, they opened up a roundtable discussion where he's a phenomenal speaker and he's got success and rubbed elbows in areas that all of us kind of dream about. But it wasn't just, hey, I need to tell you about me and tell you how successful I was and how I did it. But he brought it down to a comfortable, humble level that it made us all feel very comfortable, because he worked in areas that I don't know if anybody in this room is ever, at exception of one, that maybe has really seen and heard and done what he's done for this country. Actually, no, there's more in this room. I take that back. Now I'm thinking of military backgrounds. But his team actually reached out to me via email like 48 hours later, and that was huge. I did have a personal situation, TMI, with medical with my family, but as I was telling these folks, there's 4 or 5 people that here in the next 2 months, I've got my work cut out for me to make sure that I take those relationships and bring to fruition everything that they brought to the table for me. And then last but not least, I couldn't talk enough, Sonia DeLucia, Donald Riley, all of these folks that are decision makers in the contracts, and Sheila Martin. I had no idea that these folks were actually going to be there and she opened arms. She's like, you need to come see me, I'll come down and do this, and I'll introduce you to ABC person, and huge contact that I really didn't know going into it. I knew diversity, business, etc., but didn't understand just how far her arm reached, and same with Ed. And then last but not least, they're the thank yous. Dave, Steve from Sun Corridor, of course, Mike and Tony. I feel so comfortable as a business owner and a peer of this community as well, that I know that even once this grant's done, you know, as a part of this community, obviously I'm going to be running in the same circles with Tony and Mike, and I know that their door will always be open, but I've built a relationship with Dave and Steve as well. I know if I knock on that door and say, hey, do you have a 15-minute, conference call where I just got a few things I want to bounce off the wall for you, if I'm bumping into a rock between a hard place, or hey, I'm getting ready to make this move, looking for the encouragement of a peer that's either owned and operated their own company, or they've managed and run thousands of, I won't even go into what he's done with his company, but you have thousands of employees that reported you, that relied on you. And then of course you've got Tony on the mill. The responsibilities that these people have had brought so much of an opportunity to my plate and to Tim's plate with this company. We're just a small business, but we're also employing people and we're putting money back into the community. And every step of the way that we kept hiring, we're getting ready again. I got one more person I need to hire in the next 2 months. So along with my fact-finding mission with the 5 or 6 contacts they've thrown to me, that will be my job from here on out. And then as far as with the tools relationships, yeah, just taking advantage of it. And then as far as taking it to the next level, a lot of folks don't realize that we're actually a 10,000 square foot facility in Huachuca City. We're on 2.5 acres. And then we've also got 2 acres in Sierra Vista with about 1,700 square foot of building. So there is room for growth. So I am ready to take advantage of what these folks brought to the table, and it's due to what you basically gave for this grant. So Thank you. Does anybody
Thank-
have any questions?
What?
Did it fast. Did it fast.
Questions, anybody? I want to thank you, Yvette, for coming and doing this. I know you've been a great part of our community for a while. One of the things that I see for the city that's a role in, that you illustrated with your last comments was, you know, I was pleased to be invited to your opening in Wachuca City and be part of that. As the mayor of Sierra Vista, it was a little odd for me, but I knew at that time we're running out of industrial space for 2, 4, 6, 8 acres, and we need 10 acres. So that's one of the things we need to discuss, where the space is, what we can do to develop it, et cetera, in our future endeavors and our discussions over the next couple of years and a 2-year follow-on plan. But this is a great illustration of a way a great businesswoman can take the bull by the horns and make things happen. And I think it's a great partnership for the city to be able to work with our companies to make life better for our community. I also want to thank our friends from Sun Quarter, and I'm sure we're going to remain active even after the contract or the grant is over with, and hopefully we can find other things where we can partner with you on. So thank you, Yvette.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. And before I go away, Tony, anything else that we need to point out? I'm going to have William wants to jump in here. What do you got?
Just a quick question. The monthly reports, are those in our read file, or how can we get a copy of those?
What I've done, well, we can get them to you, so I can get you the whole consolidated report. Up until now, we've just taken bits and pieces and put it in the executive report.
Okay.
So when you see the update on the Sierra Vista Technical Assistance Program,
It's
it
in
is
the executive
elements
report.
of their report that we moved over.
Okay.
But yes, I can give you the whole report from day one.
Okay, ma'am.
I'd just like to add too, I'm so happy for you, Yvette, and so proud of what you've done with your company. I know that piece of hiring new people is probably one of the hurdles a small business has the hardest time getting over. And I'm just so happy that Sun Corridor was there and able to help you walk through that, and the other companies that that you've taken on with this, and I'm just very happy for you. I got mushy too when you started talking about that, because it is a huge thing, and so congratulations to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Christine, you too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
And that procurement conference, that was really something. I attended quite a bit of that, and just to watch and listen to the people making the connections, it was amazing to me. And Mr. Maxwell, it made me wish I was a small company because he was so encouraging to the people around him, and I just think, you know, it's just really great that we got this grant and that you guys came into this and were able to assist so much. That I just got a thing in the mail today that there's another one in August. And so I'm thinking about starting a small business. It's not here, it's in Albuquerque, I think. But, so I think I'm going to go into business and take advantage of it. Yeah, just kidding. But.
Any other comments on this item? Again, we want to thank you for presenting and participating and becoming partners with the city. It's really appreciated. So next we'll move on to item C, which is Energy Savings Initiative with Schneider Electric. And is that you, Madam Assistant City Manager? Okay. Thank you, Yvette. Good to see you.
Calendars for you folks.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, business. Get the cards out there. All right.
I would not
Make a
be
sale.
planning. I got
Make that
plenty.
sale.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was really terrific.
That was a good report. That was a good report. Okay.
It was good to hear.
You and Mikey did good.
All right, folks, so today is really the precursor to next work session. And thanks to Rachel for suggesting this. But before, what's coming up the next work session is presentation of the project we've been talking about with Schneider Electric. And so Rachel asked if we could take a step back and go through with you what is energy savings performance contracting, and go through what kind of companies these are, just a real brief snapshot on how this works, and then talk about how it relates to our strategic plan and how we got into this and how this process went. and Laura will fill in anything that I forget. So Laura's been our project manager for this whole process, and it started just over a year ago, I think, at this point. So we've been working on it for a little while. So energy savings performance contracting, basically how it works, these companies come in and they'll identify energy and operational savings. And then what that does for a community, the next step on that is then identifying how you can use those savings to reinvest back into your community for capital projects, to modernize your city in some way, and to drive economic development without much impact to your budget or bond capacity. And so that was a part that we really dragged these companies over the coals on, and how exactly does this work? Because we, frankly, when we first looked at it, we're like, this can't work this well, you know, this can't work this way. And so we brought multiple companies in for multiple meetings just to drill down and understand how this actually worked. And then what they do is this company will be your project manager and your construction firm to manage the whole project. They look at all of your possibilities for energy savings. You look at them with what your projects are that you want to work, and they present this solution to you then to fulfill your vision for your city. The way they go about that is they look at what your annual energy use is first, and that $1.2 million number is approximately what Sierra Vista's annual energy spend is, and that's electricity.
The city of Sierra Vista.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
What did I say in there?
Sierra Vista.
Okay. The city. Our city organization. That's electricity, water, and gas. So they project that with most cities and organizations they work with, between 20 and 30% of that annual energy spend is wasted. You can do better. You can be more energy efficient in any manner of ways. And so then what they do is take, here's the projects we can do in your city to save you energy. In our case, they just went to make the numbers easily understandable. About a third of those save around $300,000. And so the key here then is that money that you save, by state law, the cost to fund the project can't exceed the guaranteed savings. So the energy savings must then fund your entire project, to the point where if they are wrong on their projections, they owe the city the difference. So that also means that they tend to go very conservative in what they project for energy savings, because if they are wrong, they owe us money. So what ends up happening, at least part of the time, is since they project so moderately, you actually save money above what they project.
How do they make money?
Right. They're the construction business.
That's what we're trying to figure out.
It's coming.
That was the first question that came up with us too. They're the construction company. So they are your prime. They sub out then all the individual projects, but you are paying them to construct your project. So there's profit for them built into it. But even with their profit, it still can't exceed what your total energy savings are.
Thank you.
And so the way they set this up is they look at items that give a really quick payback, and some of those are like lighting retrofits. So LED lights are so much more energy efficient than regular lights. So they look for those items that give you a quick payback that they can then turn into, over time, to fund your major building improvements. So your capital improvement needs, your HVAC upgrades, so things that will pay you back really quickly in the long term to fund projects that are going to cost more over the long term. And this is just a snapshot of some of the things they look at. This is not everything that they looked at or that worked for the city of Sierra Vista. Specifically, some of the things that did really work for us is when they looked at our lighting. Even though the staff have been working for a number of years on doing LED retrofits, we're not 100% there, so there's still more we can do to retrofit LED lights to save some money. HVAC systems, we had 4 budgeted in our capital improvement plans this year, so HVAC systems are a big one. Old ones are major energy hogs. And then they look at some other things, which again, not all of this worked for us, but that's the kind of things that these companies look at. So specifically how this relates to us and why we started looking at this. Energy conservation first. These are 2 of your strategic focus areas and 2 specific strategic plan goals. So in your current strategic plan, you had a goal to explore ways the city can reduce energy use. So of course the first step with this is saving energy. And so they projected, Schneider Electric specifically, about 25% reduction in our energy usage. And some of those things, again, LED lights, LED sports field lighting is what we're looking at. But the other item here was under economic prosperity and through looking and updating the economic development framework in sports tourism. What we looked at doing with this project is all of the energy savings that we can garner from upgrading some of our systems can pay for things that tie to sports tourism specifically. So we looked at things like LED sports field lighting, artificial turf, the possibility of replacing the wave machine at the Cove, and then we also put in the project to upgrade the utility pedestals at Centennial Pavilion, which were in the capital improvement plan this year, as a whole picture on what can we do to bring more sports tournaments in, what can we do to increase revenue for the city by leveraging these energy savings to pay for capital projects that we may not otherwise be able to afford.
And I'll just mention that when you say upgrade utility pedestals, you're talking about the outside, or the, how do I say this, outside, the utility hookups that are outlets for events that are
Yes.
behind the pavilion.
Yes, and,
Okay.
and that project was in this
That's
year's
been
capital
around for a
improvement
while,
plan.
yeah.
We've been trying to do it for quite some time. So to finish here, just to go back over what our process was to date. So originally, Laura and our chief procurement officer talked to 8 different companies. We used a one GPA, what are they called, Laura?
National Cooperative.
Thanks. And so there were 8 companies on there, and they talked to every one of them. And they narrowed that down to a handful and invited them in for a presentation. So companies came in for a presentation. We had a presentation from each one of them. We narrowed it down to 2 from there. So we asked those 2 companies to come in and do a preliminary assessment and look over our systems and give us an idea of what a project like this might look like. And so they did that, and Schneider Electric stood out from the other company pretty substantially because they really looked at and dove into your strategic plan, and they dove into the capital improvement plan when they looked at everything and they tied that all together. And the other company came in and they said, well, if you chose us, we would do this, or we would look at that. Schneider Electric came in and said, we looked at this, we looked at that, and when they presented it to us, they said, you have this strategic plan goal that wants to do this. We saw this on your capital improvement plan, so they really tied it to that. And so that's why we selected them as the company to do this.
Victoria,
Yeah, Chuck.
also, it helped that Schneider has a similar contract on Fort Huachuca right now. So they are already here and went through a very rigorous selection process on the post. So it gave us an extra level of confidence in terms of using them.
And they were selected for that project out of more than 20 companies internationally, at least nationwide. And the possibility exists that we can save additional money by piggybacking off of some of their work on post. So that was an additional benefit from selecting Schneider Electric. So what they're currently in the process of doing is called an investment grade audit. So if at any time an IGA is referred to, that's what we're talking about, not an intergovernmental agreement. We've tried to stay away from that jargon, but it's the investment grade audit. So they have spent months at this point coming in, going through all of our buildings, just literally digging into places and crawling into corners and up into ceilings. So tomorrow they come to us with their, we've been talking all along too about things that make sense to be included, things that don't, potential returns, possible numbers. So tomorrow we get to sit down and see, here's the project, here are the numbers, here's how much Schneider Electric thinks we can save. Here's the potential project. So that's what you'll be hearing about on the 26th.
Okay, questions, discussion? Excellent briefing.
Yes.
Chuck?
Yeah, and I just want to point out, our main skeptic is Dave Felix. He's here and
Doesn't surprise me at all.
he's been doing his job very well, questioning every little thing they do. So, so when we get the recommendations, we'll be running the numbers too. So we'll be back checking everything. So I think
We would
we'll have a
expect
pretty-
that, we would expect anything less from David.
Yeah, well, that's his job. So it'll be pretty well vetted by the time we get to him.
And I think this is a great project. This came up during this discussion about how do we become more energy efficient, and this is a good way to do that and assist us in having cash to build other projects that we need to do. So, good thing. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry. You got to get my attention, okay? I know you're new here. Yeah, there you go.
Okay. 2 questions on this. This is only related to construction type energy savings? You said there are construction
Facilities.
companies. So
Yeah, it's facilities, all
type.
facilities. Current facilities and future construction, right? If we have some.
Yeah, and what I mean by that is, so the project is multifold. So it could be HVAC systems, lights, turf, a wave machine, and so by construction company, I mean, they're the prime contractor. So then they're managing the project from the top down. So they'll bring in subcontractors to do, like, if we replace the lights on the fields, if we turf. So they will manage all those individual contractors. So that's what I mean by a construction company. They're the prime contractor.
Okay.
Anything else?
And just, Mr. Mayor, when you see the presentation, coming up at your next work session, you're probably going to see some pretty big numbers. But just remember, the funding for those numbers comes out of the savings. So, and the opportunity exists. You're not going to actually see budget savings because those savings are going to go to pay for the capital equipment.
It's a wash,
Projects.
basically.
It'll be a wash, but if it were left to our own devices and going through the normal budget process for a lot of these items would take years and years for us to do, and they would be actual budget items that would be expensive. Here we have a chance to knock out large pieces of our capital replacement plan at a time. So,
yes, ma'am.
Did you have something else?
I was
as far as hiring other companies to do some of the work, is there a hire local kind of thing involved in the agreements?
Well, like with our normal contracting, we can't specify hiring local, but I know that it is a priority of theirs to at least try to work with local companies.
Encouraged. Okay. And out of that list of items that would be looked at, no decisions have been made yet of exactly what, like turf or wave machine or...
We've narrowed down what makes sense from an energy savings perspective, because there were some things we asked them to look at that they did their research on them and came back and said there just is no money savings here and you can include it, but we don't recommend it. So we've narrowed down the project possibilities, but like the wave machine's a good example. Is that something that we want to replace or not? So the project and the individual components are not final.
So we'll hear amounts though. We'll hear this would cost us this.
Next work session.
Yes, that's going to be great. Okay, that's good.
Mayor Pro Tem.
I just, 2 questions, I guess.
I want to make sure you're not the vice mayor like you said. Mayor Pro
Yeah,
Tem.
you know,
There's a
whatever,
difference.
vice president, vice mayor, whatever. So how long do they project it'll take to get the projects done once they get started?
That's part of tomorrow that we're going to discuss in turn. They will tell us that, and that's dependent too on what we decide we want our repayment term to be.
Okay.
So it could be 13 years, it could be 17 years, it could be 9 years, not likely. It could be 21 years. So that's part of what we're discussing tomorrow.
Okay, so once
Staff level.
once they get the work done, so we're saying that if it's a $300,000 savings, that's the cost. But that'll just be cost to us the first year, and then after that, we'll see the savings of about 300,000,
No,
correct?
so that's 300 savings in the first year, and then they will give you us a chart
Okay.
that says, here's what you will save in the first year, here's what we project we'll
Okay.
save in the second year, and we've gotten lots of
Okay, so we'll see
numbers.
all that on the 26th.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody
One
else?
last thing.
Yes,
I was
ma'am.
curious, how did you find out about that this exists, this type of a company?
Through the posts.
I heard about it at a conference.
And then we just happened to meet them up on the post at an event when they were getting ready to get started. So that helped too.
That's great. Mhm. And this is at the right time, I think. for
Timing's
us,
great.
too.
Yeah, timing's great. Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor Pro Tem. You did a great job, Victoria. Thanks. As usual, I should
I
say.
should have said it was the foresight of the council to include this.
Yeah, industry plan. Yeah.
So sorry,
That's
that
it.
was
I guess we don't have enough politicians sitting around the table. Okay, now the fun time. Item D, mid-year financial review.
Oh, good.
David, we're glad you're here. Paper and numbers. That's all we need. More paper and numbers.
Exciting reading for you guys.
Did he include what we're
But
gonna
wait,
save on
act now.
trees?
And just a reminder, we only have 3 minutes left.
Yes.
Okay.
Mayor, members of council, I did distribute to you the mid-year financial report. Not going to go blow by blow, but overall, for the mid-year for the general fund, we are in good shape. We are on track again, no reserve usage. That has been a continuing goal of council. In fact, discussing at the last staff meeting and tying to the energy savings is one of the projects they're looking at is retrofit of the ball field lighting. As you may remember, there is a project in the current year budget to retrofit a portion of the ball field lights, so we have a grant to pay for part of it. Makes sense, June, July obviously to have that construction going on, so we're looking at possibly delaying that to do the actual construction starting next fiscal year in the July-August timeframe.
After the season.
After the seasons are over, when we have the longest daylight in town and need the lights the least. So it works perfectly for that. And if we can do that, we are on track that if things continue, we will not need to do a financing this year. Because as I mentioned in the council meeting, the biggest project in the financing this year is the match for those ball field lights. So we are looking at, hopefully, things will continue like they have, and we'll not have to do that. I've included the refuse fund. That is an ongoing concern with rates and that. It was discussed. We did raise rates last year. As you can see, the fund is doing better than it was, so the losses decreased. I know that Public Works is working on some options given the recycling situation, and I'll take a little more discussion on what we end up doing before we come forward with a possible rate increase, or we wish to hold it for another year to see how it goes.
Sharon's not here, but she is currently, staff is working now on the drop-off recycling that the council directed us to look at. So hopefully within the next few weeks we should have an implementation plan to bring to you at work session for how we plan on moving forward with that. I've also asked them to take, it's been a long time since we've looked at routes and picking up refuse is very similar to picking up passengers on the transit system. So we can go, route by route and have our transit people take a look at those routes and see if we can find some efficiencies, because the best way for us to reduce costs in the refuse fund is to try to find a way to cut out routes. So
Less time on the road for the trucks.
Yeah.
Less maintenance, et cetera, et cetera.
And we don't need as many trucks or personnel, et cetera. So we're also going to be in the process of doing that, which we hope we'll have ready for the budget season.
So that's kind of where we're at in the current fiscal year. Yes, ma'am.
David, so if we hopefully don't have to do financing, do you have an estimate about how much that would save us as well? Usually about what, 2-3%?
Well, usually I forecast that out at about a 3-4% interest rate. Interest rates have actually kind of leveled off given the state of the economy. This year's financing total is under $1 million, so in future years it'd be a couple $100,000 to the general fund savings. Good, not like a couple years past where we had like $3 and $4 million financing,
Mhm.
but still every dollar diverted from that. And the big one for the vehicle rotation is after the 5th year, you now are saving a whole lot of money in interest, where the interest can actually pay for an extra vehicle. So, as far as that's the vehicle rotation
Mayor Pro
program.
Tem, Greg, where you'll really see this is when David publishes the comprehensive annual financial report.
Mhm.
My favorite pages show the debt and the financing. It's on page 50 of the report almost every year, same page. And you're going to see that page is literally down to one page of financings.
Yeah,
at
I'm
that
very
point,
proud of our
which
debt
is,
service and how we
which
manage
is
it.
phenomenal for
Yeah.
a city our size. So, so a lot of effort has gone into that, and David's done a great job with it.
I agree.
A key point in, when you see the department division in the general fund, I know I stated it in there, but I'll reiterate it again. A lot of bills are paid at different times of the year. So like my budget, the wonderful Department of Revenue $100,000 payment for their services is paid for in July. For the IT budget, the Spielman maintenance contract, the Munis, which is our financial software package, is paid in the first quarter of the year. So certain departments have huge payments, a large chunk of their bills are due in the first quarter of the year, so that skews it. Other departments may have expenses later in the year. When we looked at certain other funds before, like street maintenance is obviously in the summertime. So you can look at some of the departments, and depending on when things are planned and when things should happen, that may look like, oh, this department, what's going on? Well, it's because most of their expenditures are in the first half of the year.
Can I ask on that a couple of questions? Sure. Related, which probably is explained by what you just said, but like police department is almost $500,000 below budget, and
well, you can thank, part of the thing you can thank, the two things you can thank the police department for is the inability to hire police officers. They are short.
well, that's why I was like, we don't want to not have the service,
Yeah,
right? That's,
and there's two things. You know, the police department is a perfect example, and this is also goes back to, as we've discussed it many times, the theory of budgeting. You want to budget for every position in case you get it.
Okay.
And so we put in the budget, every police officer, every firefighter, if we have vacant positions and other, they use the police because they're the biggest one. I mean, if Adam could have everybody filled, he'd love to, as would every council member. He'd love to have a fully staffed police department. But especially with the police department and the fire department, which is going to be a few, next item coming up here, the public safety retirement. You may pay a new police officer, make easy numbers, $40,000 starting salary, but a retirement contribution alone is just over 50%. So you take his salary at 40, add on his retirement at $20,000 more, you can see having 5 or 10 vacant positions quickly adds up to a savings. That money is there in case we have shortfalls in other areas, if they can get somebody. And I'll address it now, though, we'll go back over it again. One of the things that has been on council is our unfunded liability to public safety. We are doing 3 things, kind of going forward, that I'll come to here, but I'll get to those when I get to the report, because we are seeing an effect of that. So that's coming up for how we're doing with some of the public safety savings, but that's kind of the police department. Some things they've got special things in case they have to extradite a prisoner, and if it doesn't get spent, then it gets dropped to the bottom line. But the biggest savings in the police department is the salaries. And they have historically been, and perfect that ties to the next item.
Did you have a second question?
I think the only other was, so we were 500,000 below on police, but nearly 300,000 above on fire.
Fire's had some issues with, and it's the same thing, but theirs is reversed. They've had people on special duty with the stuff, and they've had injuries, and they've had problems getting some people on the post contract for a little while, so they had regular firefighters having to fill in, again, at a 50% contribution rate. Not only do you have that issue, we've had overtime, having to pay the overtime for them, and Brian has worked diligently on getting some of that paid down. There's also another contract things kind of tied with that as well. So it's bringing everything into line. We are still over, but we are still revenues over expenditures for the contract.
Yeah.
So we've not exceeded that, but there's the tie of some of that, and they've had some promotions and some people out, so they've had extra overtime outside of the contract as well. But I think we have a pretty healthy fire
Question
department
answered.
now. So
Question
that's
answered.
getting fixed.
Question answered?
Yes.
Okay. Gwen has a question.
Okay.
Don't laugh. Ask your
Well, I
question.
have to laugh because sometimes, David, you know, we go around and around trying to understand this stuff. David, are you in the general fund yet?
Sure.
Okay, I was curious about why, what the meaning of the housing under, I think that's under community development?
Yes, housing. Well, as times change, when it was first formed, that division was called housing. Now you call it neighborhood enhancement. But when it's dropped in a spreadsheet, it was housing because that's what they wanted to call it at the time.
Neighborhood enhancement.
Neighborhood enhancement is
And
now
what's
what
in
you
that?
see. What's in that is when he goes in to clean up abatements, when he goes in to do the neighborhood cleanups, the money's budgeted there. If Jessica needs stuff done, that's where she has her budget to help take care of things with that. Kind of all of those type of abatements and that type of stuff is in there.
That's great,
The
thank you.
concern for that going forward is, unfortunately,
Grow.
it will be a budget item that will be increasing instead of
Decreasing.
staying stable. We still have a number of issues with dilapidated housing, mobile homes, as well as the homeless camps that we have to go in and clean up. We're seeing rather large expenses associated with those as well. And I don't anticipate
That's going to
will,
shrink.
Will we be changing that from,
diminish over time.
changing that name from housing to?
Yeah, we'll have to change it to.
I'll change that. It's in the budget's listed as neighborhood enhancement. I just have.
Yeah, we need to find
the
a better,
spreadsheet goes
a
back.
clearer euphemism for that category.
With the annualized divided by 2 method for your midterm budget, how skewed are our numbers with pay cycles?
I work to get, there's about 26 pay cycles in a year.
Okay.
So this matches,
Okay.
this one I'm able to cut in half easy. The third quarter is the pay cycle split. So I drop this after the 13th pay cycle of the year, which actually, another tie to the fire department is you have a person retire. It's not obviously $300,000, but when people retire, we've had a couple retirements, and if they've got vacation sick, they have a payout out of that.
You pay as well.
So that can be an issue too.
Thank you, Dave.
So, my
Good.
last question.
Good questions. Go ahead.
So under the refuse fund, we had only budgeted that we would get 2,500 in fees, and we got 27,000. Did we introduce a new fee, or did like that disparity?
The miscellaneous revenue fees, we charge miscellaneous revenues.
Fees, charges, and miscellaneous
That would
revenue.
be selling a refuse truck.
Oh, okay.
Fixed asset sales are included in there, and since you
Okay.
never know if they're going to sell, when they're going to sell, and the timing of them during the year, sometimes we use them for parts. So that one would be the refuse truck sales.
Okay. What's next, David?
Well, and tying back to what you had wanted before as part of your strategic plan, we did come back and we did add that we would discuss with you the prior year, is before we finally close out the books for fiscal year 18, where the general fund sits, where things sit on that one, to get your agreement and recommendations on what to do with any excess fund balance in the general fund. We are looking at about $186,000 general fund growth for fiscal year 18. Chuck and I have discussed that our recommendation to you is to leave it in that fund, let it grow, because as, I don't know if you've seen the paper, some of the major cities around the country are starting to hoard cash in concern of the next economic downturn. The rating agencies would like us to have about $1 million more in reserves.
You recommending for the city reserve, we just add that to
Add that to the
cushion.
reserves, to the cushion.
Pending future economic challenges.
Future economic challenges and about a $5 million preferred reserve the general fund reserve from
And
the
the
rating
rating-
agency.
bond rating agencies would prefer to see our reserve, general fund reserve levels up about $1 million more than what they currently are.
Okay.
Where does it sit right now?
It'd be $4 million. It's about $4
They
million.
would like to see it around 5.
Okay. And that's important for future investment, future borrowing in the city.
You're correct, Mayor. This, not only is it helpful in the event of a downturn or an emergency situation, but when the rate, if we do go out for financing or bonds in the future, the rating agencies like to see a healthy fund balance.
Now,
in
is
your
this
general
a
fund
point we're
rate.
going to discuss on our next retreat, or is this something that is going to be? I'm thinking about the new folks on the council. Is this something that we need to sit down and talk about during the budget cycle so everybody is up to speed on why we do it and how it's done and why it's important and yada
I
yada?
think either a strategic plan or the budget cycle would be appropriate, so either one.
Yeah, and I think we need to go more into depth so everybody understands why we want to build up a $5 million reserve that helps us borrow at lower rates and can pay off emergency things. And for example, should we have another monument fire, we're responsible for the first 30 days until it's declared a national emergency. Then we can get federal funds to backfill. So there's a number of reasons why we want to have a financial reserve available.
And basically, too, this number is pretty much in line with the past few years in terms of additional funds that we've been able to add. So it's difficult for us to come up with $500,000, $1 million at a time. So it's been ranging between 50, 150,000 or so a year that we've been able to add to reserves, even during the downturn.
We still had, I think one year we had $5 grand that we turned in.
But we were still able to add during a difficult time. So.
Okay. Any questions on that part? David, what's next?
And I got good news, and you guys are probably all shocked at that.
Yeah.
Last fiscal year, the HERF fund revenues were actually $540,000 over budget between the state givebacks and some other stuff that happened. I mean, this is why we budgeted conservatively, because we had a big problem a few years ago. I'm keeping an eye on this, given
Just a reminder, what do we use highway use revenue funds for from the state?
Building and maintaining roads. It is
Local
legally
streets.
restricted to building and maintaining streets.
Okay.
And because of that, and because a couple projects were not completed last fiscal year, we did not do the $700,000 transfer from the capital improvements fund to the HERF fund because it was not needed. Which then will tie us to the next subject going into next year of concerns and issues for financial. The first one is we have 3 impact fee funds. We are reviewing, Linda and I are reviewing 3 applicants, 3 bids to update our impact fees. It is time, the expiration, the moratorium goes off this July 1. Sir?
And I just remind everybody that it's briefing the council in the next couple of months. We have 3 new council members, and that probably don't know in detail what you're talking about right now.
Yeah.
And we probably have other 4. We probably got 2 that probably need a memory refresher.
Yes.
I will say who those 2 are.
Yes.
Okay, so when you say, so go in a little more detail on what the fund is and what it does, so everybody knows what's going on. That's
So we're hiring the consultants. Impact fees are the philosophy that new growth should
Pays
pay
for
for the
itself.
amenities that are needed for the new growth. So if I have new people come into the community and we need to double the size of a police station, the new people pay a fee to cover that development.
Infrastructure.
For infrastructure. It is very specific to infrastructure.
And
And
only
only
infrastructure.
infrastructure. Cannot be used
Not
for
amenities
bodies,
like parks.
cannot be other things like
Libraries.
that. Yeah. In fact, the laws have changed because, as you can imagine, developers do not like these fees. So the legislature has made various runs at trying to make it very difficult and challenging to have them. And a lot of requirements on them.
So the process is we hire
So we
normally
hire
hire
a
a
consultant.
consultant to come in and do all the detailed and the
Get the
groundwork to
LT,
make
get
sure
all the guarantees,
information-
get all the backups, so if it's
Yep.
challenged, they're to represent us, and they will work with us and work with you. Many meetings, it's a very specific process, the timeline is set by statute on how we have to do this. So we're going to review the fees, we're going to look at a couple options to maybe change some of the fees, like the park development fee, change how we assess the parks and handle the parks because we've had a history of park development fee challenges. To give a brief 30-minute thing, we have a big park in town, the south part of town, that we used to have to buy the land. We'd collect a $300 fee, and then I would turn around and buy the land for pretty much all the fee they paid for, and we have no money to put any infrastructure on it. We've made changes over time. The development fee has gone up, but 3 of our impact fees, because of the fire station, the police station, and Sears Center Park, are significantly cash negative. In fact, 2 of them, the Park Development Fee Fund and the Fire Development Fee Fund, are now considered major funds because they're so cash negative. And Sears Center Park is the total thing. We built and we bonded the expansion of the police station and the fire station, and we had bonds off of them, and then the housing market went like that. So we've been collecting very few fees. Now we can do a buy-in with it, with the fees going forward, but this is also why we're going to look at some future recommendations on how we handle the impact fee funds, and specifically the park development fee fund. And we'll come to you guys with some recommendations, get your input, and go back and forth on it. But the tie with that is, because the park development fee fund is over $3 million cash negative, we would like to recommend, if we can fit it, to take that $700,000 and start putting it towards the park development fee fund, because at the rate we've had with collecting fees, it would be 25 or 30 years before we get to 0.
You got 5 minutes before I'm going to cut you off.
Okay, so that takes care of that one. The last one.
We do want to mention one more thing about that. What's important, and when we did the financing for Sears Center Park and the police and fire station, is we did not count on the development fees to pay the debt service on those. We counted on our sales tax collections through the capital improvement fund to pay for them. If indeed we had received development fees to offset the payments on the debt service, that would have been a really good thing. But what I learned and what I saw happen in the valley during that time, where people were bonding infrastructure based solely on development fee revenue, that is a very bad practice. And we never want to put the city into that position where we're taking that kind of risk, betting on future development to pay debt service. So we don't do that here, but but that's the reason why the funds are in negative position right now.
Yeah.
I'm curious as to what gives us the confidence now to move forward on looking at increasing impact fees, and that things are different now.
That's a good question, and you probably listened to a couple of my talks. And what I'm telling people when I go out is the economy is better. We're seeing that in terms of redevelopment of businesses and buildings, empty buildings. But we are not yet seeing a new construction, and construction is what led us down, and it will be what leads us out. And when I see those building permit numbers turn around, I'll feel a lot more confident about the economy moving forward. We're not there yet, but I do feel better about our operating budget and our ability to take on some of these projects that we've had to defer here over the past few years. But not to the point where I would say, yeah, let's go crazy.
We haven't reached the promised land yet. That's what he's telling you.
So.
Okay, David.
Final bit of good news, relatively, and some of you will remember, based off, we have our actual reports. I mean, this is exciting reading. I really got to tell you, don't read it on the couch or you'll wake up on the couch. But this is what we get every year, and the important pieces in here that I'm going to highlight are, they have the current year contribution, they have what next year's contribution is, and good news for us, it is only going up $140,000 over the current year budget.
And that's about the same as it was a couple of years ago, before we had the $500,000, yada yada, 400,000
now
per year.
And it's amazing. Now, actually, on page 3, they're giving us an explanation of why the rates are changing in each report.
That's
so
news.
That's one highlight of what the changes are, assumptions and stuff like that. Unfortunately, most of what is in the problems they have is out of our control. A couple years ago, they had a 0.5% return. Paid a $100 million fee, management fee to get a 0.5% return on their investment. For us, that was like $50,000 in one and $75,000 in another. So that is actually good news. That is, we are arresting the growth. Key points on what we're doing differently is we are continuing to contribute for police officers and firefighters that have entered the DROP program. We are not required to, but since we've budgeted for them, we are continuing that contribution.
And if we didn't do that, we'd be like most of the other cities in the state. We'd have a higher charge on an annual basis after the fact.
After the fact. We'd save money this year, but since you're not paying this year, they're going to roll it in to the
They'll get you.
to do. There's a fire credit that comes out, about $100,000. The last 2 years we've said we budget the full amount. We want the fire credit to go to 100% towards our liability to reduce it. And finally, this year we have paid the full year's budgeted contribution, including those positions we have not hired yet. So that will be an extra contribution at the end of the year. We'll reconcile at the end of the year, and that will just be an extra contribution if we don't hire the firefighters or the police officers. So that will also help us long term. It fits with our budget. It's extra payments in a way, but we've budgeted this money to be spent, so we're just spending it up front. Some of the other cities have also started this payment in advance, and Paradise Valley figured they get an extra $50,000 a year at the time of investment income by paying for it early in the year.
And also, maybe tell them about the Hall and the other lawsuit.
Yeah. The big one that has affected some people negatively is the Hall lawsuit. For you new people, in 2008, when the economy tanked, the state made some changes to the public safety retirement system, upping the contributions required by the employee side. We held the people harmless. We gave them an offset every year to match the increase in that contribution. We are the only city in the state to do that. We expected the lawsuit to go that way because they did the same thing on our ASRS side, and that lawsuit was settled in 6 months in employee favor against the state. That lawsuit was finally settled 2 years ago. As expected, ruled in favor of the employee. So all the other cities in the state had to refund the money to the employees. Unfortunately for the cities too, IRS does not allow you to legally take the money out of the retirement system to repay them. So they had to play the game of, okay, well, we'll give you credit for the contribution this year, so their liability increased because they could actually not get cash back from the state for this. So many other cities have had issues with that. We have had a recent one, unfortunately does not affect too many of our people, that was also fought that they were not taking money from, they were making the employee contribute to the drop, and the state law doesn't allow that. Fortunately, we do not have a large amount of money to refund the couple of employees that are in that situation.
Questions for David?
Anything else?
Okay, you done?
Yep.
Thank you, David. Great report. And I apologize for getting up and walking around. I started to get a cramp in my leg. Next item is report on trips, recent trips, and future meetings. I just want to make a comment about the council retreat. It's critically there and on time. We start with kind of a little review of what we did of the last report, where we stand, and get a status report. So that's important before we start. But the whole idea is bring your ideas, bring your comments. Let's have a discussion. Let's figure out how to make Sierra Vista better and how we can dovetail into the publicly approved strategic plan. So it's very important that we're there with ideas and being open-minded, and the results should be, again, a 2-year plan on things that we could do, and hopefully we'll be able to afford what we want to do, and that'll be part of the final discussion.
Have the facilitators started calling yet?
I haven't had a call yet.
No.
When are they going to call us?
She's working on it. I thought there were appointments set up with you all, but nobody has contacted me.
So you need to goose them big time. It's almost too late.
8 or 8:30.
What time is start time?
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock
Staff
on the 21st.
Thursday.
And then it's like
She sent me emails this morning.
They need to get the whole council.
Okay.
What's
So
the dates
we'll-
again?
Well, start time and dates is next week?
The 20,
On the
Tuesday
19th?
and
Wednesday?
11:30 to 5:30. Wednesday is
Tuesday.
8 to 2.
Okay.
11:30 to 5:30.
Yes.
I was thinking it was Monday, Tuesday.
Well, we got President's Day.
It's a holiday.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's all I have. Anybody else have anything for recent trips, meetings, and future meetings?
No arts and humanities tonight. We're lacking a quorum due to an emergency, but we'll
Okay.
have one next month.
And I need to go talk to them. They've asked me to come talk about
Yes, so not tonight.
what humanities means, I guess is what I'm supposed to talk about. Sir.
Yeah, I'd like to get NAMI on the schedule to talk at a work session.
Okay. All you got to do is talk to Victoria.
Okay.
And we'll get them on there.
Thank you, sir.
Anything else? Board and commission updates, you just gave us one. We got any other boards and commission updates?
Oh, the West End Commission met last night, and we're looking for more vendors for the West End Fair on May 4th. If you have a business on the West End, it's free. Non-profits, I think, are
And the West End is defined, everything west of 7th?
everything west of 7th,
First
right?
weekend in May.
Okay.
Yeah, Saturday, May 4th. It's Star Wars Day, so they're trying to do a theme.
Oh, cool.
So
So.
if that makes a difference to anybody in this room.
Anything else on boards and commissions?
Cody is working with Just Kids, the Kiwanis, to
Yep.
do a program in the park for children with disabilities. Has a wonderful name,
good.
Extraordinary Children, Extraordinary Activities for Uncommon something.
yeah,
Anyway,
something
it
like-
uses extraordinary and uncommon.
Uncommon, it's
in
like
it.
us,
It's a
oh,
beautiful,
cool.
Extraordinary event for uncommon children. or something.
extraordinary event for uncommon children.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, it's better than
Okay,
an
that
uncommon
sounds
event for
good.
extraordinary
Extraordinary.
Something like that.
Yeah, that wouldn't go over well. And then EAC, of course, is still working and, active and looking at, they're looking at presenting some information to the city on a different type of recycling.
Okay. All right, cool. Anything else on that item? Future items and council requests. First of all, what's coming up for future work sessions?
So on the 26th, we'll be presenting the Schneider Electric project, and then we shifted the transit and pavement condition index survey to the 26th as well.
Okay. Any council requests from folks that are around the table?
I have one other group. I went to the Sierra Vista Be Healthy meeting, and they're doing some wonderful things towards Sierra Vista being healthy, which is not part of our strategic plan. But two of the things, one, they're looking at transportation for people who are in food deserts, who have no connection with food, no connection to grocery stores. And Mike Normand has been attending those meetings and has been really, really helpful to the folks there who are trying to figure out how to help people who can't get good food sources. And also they're looking at community gardens and how we might increase gardens so that people have more access to
We have
fresh
more than one.
fruit and vegetables.
Okay. Other things for the good of the order? Next meeting is Thursday, 5 o'clock, council chambers. I'll try to be there this time. If there's nothing else from staff, Chuck, Victoria, nothing else from council? Good meeting, and thanks for all the great input, staff, and work. Meeting's adjourned.